Sweetheart, calm down. Don't be selfish. That's what my mom said while strangers she'd hired carried boxes with my sister's name into my living room. My dad barked orders upstairs like he owned the place, and years of work vanished one cardboard box at a time. Every sacrifice, every night I stayed late at the office, dismissed with a single smile. For a moment I almost believed them. Maybe I was the problem. Too protective. Too cold. But before you decide I'm the villain of this story, wait until you see what was written on the deed, right under their names. My name is Savannah Cole. I'm 30 years old, and this house, the one they tried to invade, wasn't a gift. It wasn't handed down in a will, and no one helped me buy it. I earned it. Every skipped vacation, every freelance gig I took after midnight, every promotion I clawed my way toward, it all went into this home by the lake. My safe place, my proof that I was more than the forgotten daughter. Growing up, it was always my sister. She was the miracle child, the one who could do no wrong. When she brought home a B, my parents clapped like she'd saved the world. When I brought home an A, they barely looked up. Her birthdays meant balloons, cakes, relatives crowding the living room. Mine came with a promise, we'll celebrate later, that never happened. You think a kid forgets that? No, it sticks. By the time we hit our teenage years, the roles were set in stone. She was the princess, I was the spare. So I stopped asking for their attention. I started building my own life, my own identity, one quiet victory at a time. I worked through college, paid my tuition alone, and told myself one day I'd own something that couldn't be taken from me. When I finally signed the deed to this house, I thought I'd broken free. Maybe, just maybe, they'd be proud. But instead of pride, I got comments like, "Must be nice not having kids to worry about," or "Don't get too comfortable. Savannah, life changes." I smiled through it all. I thought keeping my distance would keep the peace, and it did until that afternoon. My phone buzzed while I was at work. It was my neighbor Savannah. "There are moving trucks in your driveway. Did you sell your house?" My stomach dropped. Within minutes, I was racing home, heart pounding. When I pulled into the driveway, my world tilted. Movers I didn't know were marching across my hardwood floors carrying boxes labeled kitchen, master bedroom, kids room. My sister's handwriting, "Stop." I shouted louder than I meant. Everything froze. The movers exchanged glances. My mom turned toward me with that same patient smile, the one that always made me feel small. "Sweetheart, calm down," she said gently, as if she were talking to a child. "Your sister's family is struggling. You have all this space. You don't need it." I clenched my fists. "This is my house, paid for with my money. You don't get to move people in without asking me." From upstairs came my dad's booming voice. "Don't be selfish, Savannah Family Shares. You should be grateful you even have this place. Now it can actually serve a purpose." That word selfish burned hotter than ever. They'd spent my whole life calling me that, twisting my independence into guilt. Then my sister stepped forward. Her arms crossed, chin lifted, her husband smirking behind her. "Oh, come on, Savannah. Don't act like you need this house. You're single. No kids. No responsibilities. You don't even know what a real burden is." Her words hit harder than my dad's roar, because deep down it confirmed what I'd always known: they never saw me as enough. The movers hesitated, caught in the family chaos. One finally asked, "Ma'am, your mom hired us. Should we keep unloading?" I turned to him, my voice steady. "No, stop unloading. She's not the owner. I am. If you keep going, you're helping commit theft." They looked at each other, then slowly set the boxes down. One muttered under his breath, "Good luck." That was the moment I knew this wasn't confusion or miscommunication. It was planned. They thought I'd fold like always. Not this time. I pulled out my phone and hit record. The red light blinked, catching everything, the boxes, my mom's fake. Calm, my dad's thunderous stride, my sister's smug smile. "Savannah, turn that off." Mom snapped her mask, slipping. "This is family business." "No," I said. "This is legal business now." My sister lunged for my phone. "Delete that. You're not making us look bad." I stepped back. "You don't need my help to look bad." My dad's face turned crimson. "You will not drag this family's name through the mud." I laughed, cold and bitter. "You broke into my house. You hired movers. You tried to evict me from my own life. Tell me, Dad, which part of that is a misunderstanding?" The room fell silent. Only my heartbeat filled the air. That's when they realized the old Savannah, the quiet one, was gone. I looked each of them in the eye. "You need to leave. Now." They didn't move. My dad's jaw clenched. My mom whispered something to my sister. They still thought they could outweight me. So I walked to the front door, shut it, and slid the deadbolt with a click. The sound echoed like a gunshot in a church. "You're not welcome here anymore," I said. For the first time, they looked unsure. And that was the beginning of everything that came next. They thought I was bluffing. My dad puffed out his chest like his authority could erase my name off the deed. My mom switched tactics, her voice softening into the kind of tone she used to guilt me into apologizing for things I hadn't done. My sister whispered to her husband, certain I wouldn't dare take this further. But fear wasn't in charge anymore. I walked to the front door, turned the lock again, and said quietly, "You're not welcome here." The click of that lock hung in the air. My sister flinched. My dad's jaw tightened. For the first time in my life, they looked uncertain. Mom gasped, "Savannah, don't say things you'll regret. We're your parents." I lifted my phone, showing the recording still running. "This video goes to my lawyer tonight, and if you step foot here again, the police will have it too." Dad stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You wouldn't dare call the police on your own family." I met his stare. "Try me." For once, the room was quiet. No lectures, no yelling, just silence, thick enough to choke on. My sister's husband muttered, "Let's just go tugging at her arm." But she shook him off her pride louder than her common sense. "You think anyone will believe you over Mom and Dad? Everyone knows how dramatic you are. They'll laugh at you." I smiled small and sharp. "Everyone will believe the deed. Everyone will believe the video. Everyone will believe the text where you admitted you were moving in." Her mouth snapped shut. They picked up their boxes in angry, jerky movements, muttering curses under their breath. I didn't move until the last one stepped out. Then I slammed the door and locked it again. This time the sound didn't echo like warning, it rang like victory. But I knew it wasn't over. They'd twist the story. They always did. So I took a photo, just one. The front door, boxes stacked outside. My sister's name written across them in thick black marker. Then I opened my social media app and typed 5 words, "When family forgets boundaries." That was it. No details, no names, just that photo and those words. It spread faster than I could have imagined. Friends, coworkers, even people from college I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me. The comments poured in sympathy, anger stories of their own. For the first time, I wasn't the one standing alone in the dark. By nightfall, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, Mom, Dad, Sister, dozens of them. They'd spent years ignoring me, now they couldn't stop reaching out. That night, I turned my phone face down and let it vibrate itself into silence. By Friday, it had turned into chaos. At 8:14 p.m., 3 voicemails came in back to back. Mom, first, her voice trembling. "Savannah, please. Take it down. We'll talk. We'll fix this." Then Dad, still trying to sound in control. "Enough is enough. You've made your point. Stop this before it ruins us." And finally, my sister, sharp, furious, entitled, "Delete it, Savannah. You don't know what you're doing." But I did. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I was doing. Saturday morning pounding shook my front gate. I pulled up my camera feed on my phone, and there they were. My family, standing outside my gate like strangers. My mom's hair was disheveled, her pearls missing mascara streaked. Dad's voice had lost its usual thunder. He looked smaller somehow. "Savannah, please, Mom called. We can talk this out. Don't do this to us." Dad's tone cracked. "You've made your point. You don't understand what people are saying about us. You're tearing the family apart." I almost laughed. Tearing the family apart. They'd been doing that for years. I just finally stopped pretending it was fine. Then my sister stepped forward, fists clenched. "Delete the post. Let us move in, or I swear you'll regret this." I leaned toward the intercom, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "Regret. You pawned my trust for years. You tried to steal my home. You humiliated me, and now because the world finally sees it, you think I'm the problem." Her lips trembled. Her husband whispered something, tugging her arm, but she didn't move. I pressed the button on my phone. The house alarm blared loud and shrill. They jumped, startled. My mom covered her ears. My dad grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the car. My sister froze for a heartbeat, then ran after them. Neighbors peeked through their curtains. Dogs barked. And just like that, the people who once owned every room I entered were reduced to intruders running from their own reflection. By Monday morning, the fallout had begun. My post had been shared thousands of times. At work, people whispered when I walked by. Is it true my sister's boss called her into a meeting about personal image? My mom's charity group cut her off from every luncheon, every glossy magazine photo she'd used to build her reputation. Dad's golf buddies stopped answering his calls. Their perfect image polished for decades shattered in a weekend. And I didn't have to yell, didn't have to fight. All I had to do was hold up a mirror. Of course they didn't stay quiet for long. The second wave came in voicemails full of guilt trips and old tricks. Dad's voice first low and almost rehearsed. We're your parents. We raised you. Don't you owe us some loyalty? That word made me laugh. The same loyalty that was never returned to me. Then Mom, her tone soft and trembling. Family sacrifices Savannah. That's what love means. Funny how sacrifice always meant me giving something up. And my sister, oh, she tried a different angle entirely. You're ruining our lives over nothing. You'll end up alone, Savannah. Completely alone. Maybe once that would have terrified me. But as I sat in my living room, the sunlight reflecting off the lake, I realized I wasn't alone. I was finally free. Still, I wasn't naive. Shame could turn to rage fast. So I gathered everything, videos, screenshots, contracts, and sent them to my lawyer. His reply came quickly. You're protected. This is airtight. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about rewriting the rules. The next confrontation came face to face. I was coming home from the grocery store when I spotted them parked across the street. My parents, my sister, her husband, all sitting in the car like ghosts who didn't know they'd already been buried. I stood by my trunk loading groceries into bags, pretending not to notice. But the moment my mom stepped out, waving her hands, I knew peace was over. Savannah, please, just 5 minutes, she pleaded. I straightened the car door, slamming behind me. You don't get 5 minutes, I said evenly. Not anymore. Dad got out next slower this time, his posture smaller than I remembered. You can't destroy us over pride. Think of your sister's children. Where will they go? For a second, the words pierced me. The kids, my niece and nephew, innocent in all this. But I knew what this was, another manipulation, another way to make my empathy a weapon against me. I set the last grocery bag down and shut the trunk. They'll go wherever you provide for them. That's your job, not mine. My sister burst from the passenger seat, her eyes wild. You heartless witch. You'll regret this. You'll regret ever crossing me. I didn't flinch. I met her rage with quiet calm. I already regret giving you the chance to walk into my house. That won't happen again. She froze for a moment, then slammed the car door so hard it rattled. The engine roared. Tires screeched. Neighbors stepped outside, curious. I stood still, letting them all see it, letting there be witnesses. By the end of that week, everything shifted. The calls slowed. The threats stopped. And the silence that followed wasn't tense anymore, it was victory. They weren't just losing me, they were losing everyone else too. I'd learned something in those quiet days. Revenge didn't always need fire. Sometimes it came wrapped in stillness, in patience, cold enough to outlast their anger. That silence became my weapon. Because while they scrambled to rebuild their image, I didn't move a muscle. I didn't take the post down. I didn't answer their calls. I let the world decide for itself. And the world had already made up its mind. By the next Monday, the storm had fully broken. My post still pinned at the top was being shared by strangers across states. Comments poured in from people who'd lived the same story. This is my mom, too. I thought I was alone. Thank you for saying what I never could. For years, I'd begged for my family's validation. Now I didn't need it. I had something stronger proof that I wasn't crazy, that my boundaries were valid. Meanwhile, the consequences kept unfolding. Mom's charity circle dropped her from every committee. No more luncheons, No more front-page features in local magazines. Dad's golf club quietly removed him from the board to avoid controversy. And my sister, her company's HR department asked her to take a leave until her family matters settled down. The empire they built on reputation collapsed faster than I could have imagined, and all I did was tell the truth. It was strange, though, how quiet victory can feel. No fireworks, no dramatic music, just me sitting on my back porch, coffee in hand, watching sunlight ripple across the lake. That house had once been just a dream, 4 walls and a deed with my name, but now it was something more. It was a line in the sand, a declaration. They used to tell me that love meant sacrifice, that family meant surrender, but I'd learned something different. Love without respect is manipulation, and family without boundaries is just control. I used to think standing up to them would make me the villain, but the truth is, sometimes you have to be the villain in someone else's story to be the hero in your own. Weeks passed. One morning, as I was making coffee, my phone buzzed with an email from my lawyer, case closed. Property secure. No further claims possible. I smiled a small private smile and finally exhaled. The house was quiet again. Peaceful. But it wasn't the fragile peace I used to chase. It was the kind that comes when you stop apologizing for existing. Later that night, I stepped out onto the porch, the moonlight glinting off the water. I thought about all the years I spent trying to earn their approval, chasing a version of love that was always conditional. And for the first time, I didn't feel bitter. I just felt done. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need them to see me, because I finally saw myself. By the following Monday, the world had moved on, but something inside me hadn't. Not anger, just clarity. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them harm. I simply stopped giving them the power to hurt me. I kept the post up. Not out of spite, but as a reminder to anyone scrolling through their own family's chaos that boundaries aren't cruelty, they're survival. Every so often, messages still came in from strangers. Your story helped me leave. I stood up to my mom today. You gave me courage. And that more than the likes or shares was what mattered. The lake breeze was cool that evening. My reflection shimmered on the surface of the water. I thought about the word selfish, how they'd thrown it at me my whole life like a weapon. But maybe selfish isn't always wrong. Maybe sometimes it just means choosing yourself. That's what this house became, a symbol of choosing myself. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of peace. Because love doesn't mean surrender, and family doesn't mean ownership. So if you've ever had to draw that line, if you've ever been called selfish for standing your ground, know this: you're not alone. You're just finally free. If this story hit close to home, tell me in the comments, have you ever had to stand up against your own family? Your words remind me I'm not the only one. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that prove sometimes loving yourself means saying no. My name is Evelyn Sharp. I'm 58 years old. And the moment I knew my 30-year marriage was over wasn't during a screaming fight or a lawyer's phone call. It was in the soft hum of violins, in the hush of 300 guests, watching my daughter walk down the aisle in the warmth of my husband's breath as he leaned close to my ear and said, "After this, I'm moving out. I've already packed. We'll talk later." Just like that. No emotion, no apology, just a casual whisper, as if he were commenting on the weather or the menu. My fingers gripped the white rose bouquet tighter, but my face didn't flinch. I nodded calmly, politely, like the perfect wife I'd always been. "Of course, dear," I murmured. And that's when I knew. Douglas Sharp thought he'd won. He believed he'd found the perfect moment to detonate his betrayal when I was surrounded by family and friends' cameras clicking all eyes on our daughter. When I couldn't scream or cry or make a scene, he thought I'd crumble silently, that I'd stay frozen just like always. But what he didn't know, what he could never have guessed, is that I'd seen this moment coming. And I'd been preparing. Oh, I'd been preparing for months. As Victoria moved down the garden aisle of our Charleston estate, wearing her grandmother's pearls and that hopeful smile only brides have, I stood next to the man I'd spent half my life building a world with and realized just how badly he'd underestimated me. I didn't glance at him again. Instead, my eyes drifted 3 rows back. There she was, Leah Morrison, 28, polished, poised, and far too well dressed for someone earning a secretary's salary. That navy blue dress, easily $1,000. Her hair freshly blown out. Her nails French tipped. I'd met her twice at Bright Hollow development events the company Douglas and I had built together. I thought she was professional, pleasant, stupid. I'd been so stupid, but not anymore. As the vows began and the officiant spoke about trust and commitment, the irony wasn't lost on me. My husband stood tall, a proud smile on his face, his tie straight and perfect-looking, every bit the devoted father. No one in that crowd knew that the man beside me had already moved out of our home, that he'd signed a lease for a luxury downtown condo, that he'd rerouted money from our joint investment accounts to secretly fund his new life with Leah. But I knew, because I'd been watching and tracking and documenting. 6 months ago, I started noticing the changes, the late-night meetings, the new tailored suits that he never mentioned, the cologne that wasn't mine, the phone that never left his pocket even in the bathroom. At first, I told myself it was stress, business, maybe even a midlife crisis. But when he started referring to Leah only as my assistant, like she didn't have a name, I knew. And I stopped guessing. I started confirming. I went back over our joint credit card statements, noticed the odd charges, a boutique I didn't shop at, a restaurant I'd never been to, jewelry I never received. Then came the second cell phone, hidden under the driver's seat of his BMW. Password protected, but not to someone like me, someone who's managed every detail of our family's estate for 3 decades. I'm not just a housewife. I'm a CPA, a damn good one. I gave up my career for Douglas to raise Victoria, to build his business, to keep the home running while he shook hands and gave speeches. I made sure every bill was paid, every tax, filed every investment sound. He thought I was just balancing checkbooks while he played empire builder. But behind the scenes, I created the empire's foundation, and now I was about to watch it collapse from the inside out. 3 months ago, I hired Catherine Webb, private investigator, discreet, efficient, and highly recommended by my attorney, Harrison Phillips. Within a week, I had the first batch of evidence, Douglas and Leah arm in arm outside that apartment building downtown. Another week, and I had receipts, financial records, text logs, a timeline of deceit so precise it read like a criminal report. But the final nail, the condo lease. Douglas had signed it 2 months ago, listing Leah as a co-occupant. Paid the deposit from a business account I'd never seen, one he opened in secret, then filled with funds siphoned off from our investments. It was all so methodical, so arrogant, so incredibly sloppy. As Victoria and Thomas exchanged rings beneath the blooming magnolia trees, I smiled for the cameras. I dabbed tears from my eyes when Victoria's voice cracked. Everyone thought it was emotion, and it was, but not the kind they assumed. Douglas thought he'd trapped me, that he'd executed a perfect clean exit. But the truth, he was the one, walking into a trap. My trap. The ceremony ended in a blur of champagne toasts, laughter, and flash photography. Everyone wanted a picture with the happy couple and their happy parents. Douglas and I stood arm in arm, smiling like nothing was wrong. He played the charming husband to perfection. You'd think we were hosting our daughter's wedding from a place of love, not betrayal. But beneath my smile, every moment was calculation. As guests mingled in the garden, I moved through the crowd like a ghost, elegant, polite, and invisible in the way older women often become once their daughters take center stage. No one noticed the envelope tucked in my clutch. No one saw the quiet fire behind my eyes. Because while Douglas played his final scene, I was already executing mine. It started 2 months earlier in Harrison Phillips' office, our longtime family attorney. His building overlooks Charleston Harbor, and I remember staring at the sailboats while I handed him the first packet of documents Catherine Webb had compiled. Photos, bank statements, a timeline, all in black and white. "Evelyn," he said, after reading in silence for several minutes. What your husband has done qualifies as marital misconduct under South Carolina law. Harrison laid it out clearly: Douglas's secret financial transfers, his concealed condo lease, his hidden business account. Every move was a legal misstep. And while I could have gone scorched earth, I had a different idea. I don't want to destroy him publicly, I told Harrison. I want him to destroy himself. That's when we designed what Harrison called the surgical approach. We didn't block Douglas's transfers. We let him continue. Let him think he was moving money into safe havens. But behind the scenes, I began quietly restructuring everything. Our family home, the Kiowa Island vacation house, the rental properties, the retirement accounts, even our primary business assets. All of it moved into irrevocable trusts and protected legal entities. By the time Douglas noticed anything, he'd be weeks too late. I signed documents in secret. I redirected communications. I created layers of legal protection so dense that not even Harrison could access certain holdings without dual authorization. Douglas thought he was clever, siphoning money, slowly hiding it under false names, shifting it away before making his big announcement. But in reality, he was stealing money from a pot that was no longer his. The irony still makes me smile. Catherine's final discovery was the most satisfying of all. She'd found the paperwork for a transition account Douglas created to support his new life with Leah. He'd funneled nearly $500,000 into it over 4 months, only to discover later that most of those funds had originated from holdings he no longer legally controlled. He's been funding his mistress with assets he doesn't own, Catherine told me dryly. And every transfer strengthens your case. By the time Victoria's wedding weekend rolled around, everything was ready. I had the documents, the evidence, the divorce papers prepared and dated. I'd even arranged to meet with a financial crimes liaison at the district attorney's office just in case Douglas tried to fight back dirty. The final step: waiting. Waiting for him to say something, do something. Prove that his arrogance was still intact. And of course he did. The rehearsal dinner was a surreal experience. Douglas gave a glowing speech about commitment, love, and 30 years of marriage. He called me the heart of the family, praised my sacrifice, my patience, my strength. Guests wiped their eyes. I smiled and nodded, holding my wine glass steady. Leah watched from the edge of the room, silent, observing, wearing another designer dress. She probably thought she'd won. Later that night, I saw Douglas slip outside to take a call. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. I already knew the content of his conversations, the tone of his texts. I had the transcripts. What he didn't know was that his phone, his secret phone, had been cloned, and Catherine had been tracking him for months. Every whisper, every message, every hotel booking, every flower delivery, all documented, all admissible, all ready to become very public if necessary. The day of the wedding arrived clear and bright, a perfect Charleston spring morning. I woke early, reviewed the paperwork one last time, placed everything in the envelope, and tucked it into my purse. Then I dressed, applied my makeup, and stepped into the garden like a woman who had nothing to hide. And in a way, I didn't. I'd already done the hard part, surviving the betrayal. Now I just had to end it. As the photographer positioned us for family photos, Douglas leaned close again. I felt the heat of his breath as he repeated what he'd whispered before. I think this is the cleanest way, Evelyn. No messy drama, no legal war. I looked him dead in the eyes. I agree. A clean break is exactly what we need. He smiled, probably relieved, believing I'd rolled over again, that I'd go quietly just like I always had. He didn't realize he was the one walking into the fire. After the toasts, the dancing, and the final round of applause for the newlyweds, the crowd slowly thinned. Victoria and Thomas had left in a shower of rice and cheers, bound for their Italian honeymoon. Guests lingered briefly to hug us, offer congratulations, and comment on the beauty of the ceremony. One even said, "You two are such an inspiration." Still so in love after all these years, I just smiled and thanked them because what else could I say? They didn't see the man standing next to me for what he really was. They saw the mask, the practiced performance of a man who had been building a dual life with meticulous detail and no soul. When the last guest left and the catering crew began breaking down tables and flower arches, Douglas and I were finally alone. The garden was silent now, petals scattered across the stone path, the faint clinking of glasses being packed away. He looked content, as if he'd pulled it off. "That went well," he said, stretching his back and loosening his tie. Victoria looked happy. "She did," I agreed. Then I reached into my clutch and pulled out the manila envelope I'd carried with me all day. "I believe you mentioned we needed to talk," I said calmly, handing it to him. Douglas blinked. "What's this?" "Everything you'll need for your fresh start." I said it as if I were handing over a gift. In a way, I was. He opened it expecting what a handwritten note, a list of items to pack a gentle letter of closure. He got divorce papers, filed 3 weeks prior, a full breakdown of our marital assets, copies of every account he'd touched without authorization, legal documents proving my restructuring efforts, records from the DA's office signed and time-stamped, and one beautiful page detailing all the accounts he'd tried to use and now couldn't access. I watched the progression on his face like a slow-motion train wreck. First a puzzled frown, then alarm, then full-blown panic. "This is dated before the wedding," he said, his voice cracking as he flipped through the pages. You filed these 3 weeks ago." I nodded. "The day after I found the lease for the apartment." His fingers shook as he pulled out the asset list. "You moved everything into trusts before Evelyn, this isn't legal. This can't be legal. These are our accounts. I moved that money," Douglas, I said, still composed. "You moved money you no longer had legal access to. That's called dissipation of marital assets. Harrison already filed paperwork with the district attorney's office. Every transfer is being investigated. No, this isn't." He looked around as if trying to anchor himself in reality. "This isn't how this was supposed to go." I almost laughed. He truly believed he could destroy our marriage fund, an affair, build a new life, and still come out on top. He didn't just underestimate me, he erased me from his plans entirely. "Everything you've touched," I said softly, "everything you funneled into those accounts is no longer yours." He shook his head slowly. "You've been planning this for months." "Why didn't you say anything?" I tilted my head. "Why didn't you?" For the first time in 30 years, I saw Douglas not as a powerful businessman, not as my husband, but as a man caught naked in his own arrogance. He'd been so confident, so certain that I wouldn't fight back, that I wouldn't know how. But the truth is, I'd been the quiet architect of our empire all along. He was just the face. I was the foundation. And I had finally removed the scaffolding. He tried bargaining, begging, promising to end things with Leah, to cancel the apartment, to try counseling. "We don't have to destroy everything we've built," he pleaded. I asked. "You destroyed it the moment you whispered your goodbye while our daughter was walking down the aisle." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. That seemed to unnerve him even more. "I'll fight this," he said. Finally, his voice low but trembling. "I'll call my attorney. We'll see what a judge says." I nodded. "You could. But you should know if you fight this, the DA will pursue the fraud case. Every document, every photo, every message will become part of the public record. Victoria will see it. Your investors will see it. Charleston society will see it." He went silent. He knew I was right. He'd already lost. The only thing left was whether he would lose quietly or lose everything. I stood in the garden where my daughter had said her vows just hours earlier and looked at the man who had once been my whole world, and I saw a stranger unraveling in front of me. By the following Monday morning, Douglas's life looked the same from the outside. He dressed in one of his crisp new suits, left the house with his leather briefcase, and headed into downtown Charleston like he always did. But behind that facade, the structure was already crumbling. That morning, he discovered his corporate credit card had been declined, then his personal one. When he called the bank, they informed him that the authorized signer on the business account Me had removed his access. Then came the email from the investment firm, a courtesy notification that his attempts to withdraw funds had failed. The accounts were now governed by irrevocable trust agreements, no transactions allowed without my signature. By lunchtime, he'd left 6 voicemails on my phone. By dinner, there were 20. I didn't respond to a single one, because there was nothing left to say. The man who had whispered betrayal into my ear during our daughter's wedding thought he could rewrite 30 years of partnership with a one-sentence exit. He was learning the hard way that I'd written the rest of the script. Leah Morrison submitted her resignation that same week. No explanation, no farewell lunch, just a short email and a clean desk. I imagine she realized what Catherine had already confirmed: her association with Douglas was toxic. The paper trail of their affair, the timeline of asset transfers, the suspicious condo lease. It was all enough to taint her professional name permanently in Charleston's tight-knit business world. Catherine had been meticulous, not just in documenting the affair, but in mapping out every questionable financial move. She built a case so airtight that even Douglas's own lawyer called Harrison privately to ask if there was any way to settle quietly. There wasn't, because Douglas hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed the legal foundation of his own empire. He used company funds to finance personal assets, falsified business expenses, lied to financial advisors, and left enough digital footprints to fill a courtroom. Within 2 weeks, the district attorney's office launched a preliminary fraud inquiry. Douglas went into damage control mode. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he started calling up old business contacts, trying to rally support, casting himself as the victim of a vengeful wife. But Charleston's elite don't tolerate scandal, not the kind that involves financial impropriety. Investors pulled out of 3 of his ongoing development projects. A 4th, his crown jewel downtown hotel renovation, was halted due to internal restructuring, which everyone knew meant financial instability. The press hadn't gotten wind of it yet, but whispers were everywhere, and I didn't have to say a word. While Douglas was calling attorneys trying to contain the mess, I was attending Victoria's post-wedding brunch, smiling, hugging her friends, listening to honeymoon stories from her new in-laws. When people asked why Douglas wasn't there, I said simply, he had business to attend to. The irony made the orange juice taste sweeter. I played my role with grace because I'd already won. I didn't need to expose him, I only needed to let the truth catch up. And it did faster than I expected. 2 real estate partnerships dissolved their contracts with Bright Hollow Development. A prominent investor filed a civil claim for misrepresentation, citing suspicious bank activity linked to Douglas's accounts. And our daughter, she returned from Italy to find the headlines swirling quietly through Charleston society columns. Prominent developer faces legal scrutiny. Victoria called me, her voice uncertain. "Mom, is it true I didn't lie?" "Yes," I told her gently, "but everything's going to be fine, I promise." She was silent for a long moment. "Did you know at the wedding?" "Yes." More silence. And then, "I'm proud of you." That was the moment that hit me the hardest. Not the betrayal, not the legal battles, but hearing my daughter say those words with quiet strength. She'd watched me play the role of silent supporter for years. Now she saw the woman behind the mask, and she respected her. Douglas, on the other hand, was unraveling fast. The DA's office moved forward with an official investigation into misappropriation of funds. Catherine handed over every file, every email, every document. The puzzle was complete. Douglas had turned our legacy into a liability, and now he had to answer for it. The calls stopped. At first, it was just a pause in the endless stream of voicemails. Then a full day went by. 2. Then a week. Douglas had gone quiet. But not because he'd accepted defeat, because he was scrambling, trying to stay afloat as the walls he'd built so carefully collapsed around him. Word spread faster than wildfire through Charleston's social circles. Not because I told anyone, but because whispers love to travel when reputations are involved, especially the fall of someone like Douglas Sharp, a man who built his name on charm, credibility, and connections. The invitations stopped coming. So did the smiles in the boardroom. One of his longest-standing clients pulled out of a contract worth nearly 8 figures. Another closed their offices to any Sharp-affiliated vendors. He'd spent decades crafting the illusion of being irreplaceable, and in 2 weeks, that illusion shattered. Meanwhile, I kept moving. I retained sole control of the real estate holdings we once shared. All the income-generating properties were now legally mine-managed through trusts he couldn't touch. The Kiowa Island Retreat Mine, the family estate in Charleston, still mine. The business accounts he thought he'd drained reimbursed through court orders once the dissipation of assets was formally recognized. Douglas tried once more to contact me, this time through Harrison. He wanted to discuss terms. But the time for negotiation had passed. He didn't get to whisper goodbye at our daughter's wedding and then ask for a compromise. Instead, Harrison sent over the final settlement packet, asset division already resolved, financial restitution calculated, and a strict non-disparagement clause that would protect Victoria from further scandal. Douglas signed it, quietly, without protest, because he knew what would happen if he didn't. Everything would go public, every photo, every text, every late-night meeting with Leah. Every suspicious withdrawal and account transfer. Catherine had documented it all, and we were prepared to submit the evidence to both civil and criminal courts. But that wasn't the route I wanted. This wasn't revenge for me, it was liberation. I didn't need his public ruin. I only needed him out of the way, and now he was. Leah. She moved to Atlanta according to one of Catherine's follow-up reports. Quietly. No job listed, no public social media. Just disappeared. I didn't care enough to track her beyond that. She wasn't my concern anymore. My concern was healing, building something new. For myself. For 30 years, I'd been the architect behind someone else's dream. I ran the books, managed the staff, raised the child, built the lifestyle. And now, for the first time in decades, I wasn't answering to anyone but myself. I took a short trip to Maine, just a week, stayed in a seaside cottage and read every day by the water. No spreadsheets, no calls, no planning, just silence. It was strange at first, almost unsettling. But then I realized it wasn't emptiness. It was peace. When I came back to Charleston, I started a financial consulting group for women in transitional phases, divorcees, widows, women leaving toxic partnerships. They came in quietly at first, hesitant, nervous, and then they saw me. And something clicked, because I knew exactly what it felt like to be blindsided, to be underestimated, to be dismissed. But more importantly, I knew how to rebuild. One woman told me, "You don't look like someone who's been through hell." I smiled. That's because I walked through it with my head up. The scandal around Douglas eventually faded, replaced by newer dramas, newer faces. But the consequences didn't disappear. He's no longer invited to any major investment tables. His business license is under review, and the whispers haven't stopped. He became the cautionary tale. The man who thought he could start over without looking back, only to discover that his past was waiting for him at the altar. 6 months later, I'm sitting alone in the same garden where Victoria said her vows. The magnolias are blooming again. Petals drift lazily to the ground and a soft breeze moves through the ivy-covered trellis. The same stone path she walked down in her wedding dress now leads only to quiet. No guests, no string quartet, just me, a cup of tea, and the peace that follows after a storm has passed. A lot has changed, and yet everything feels more mine now. Douglas is no longer a presence in my life. Not physically, not emotionally, not financially. He lives somewhere else now in a condo that no longer feels like a prize. According to Harrison, he's attempting to rebuild his reputation. But without Leah, without investors, and with most of his bridges burned behind him, the path is uphill, steep, lonely. He hasn't contacted Victoria since the divorce finalized. She told me she's okay with that. It hurts less than pretending she said. That broke my heart a little, but it also reminded me how strong she is, how much strength she must have learned just by watching me even when I didn't know she was looking. My daughter is married, building her own life, and I'm finally building mine. I never imagined I'd start over at 58, but here I am helping other women find their financial voice, mentoring young professionals, volunteering at a local shelter on weekends. My calendar used to be filled with Douglas's meetings and dinner reservations. Now it's filled with purpose. Sometimes I look back and wonder what would have happened if Douglas had chosen differently, if he'd been honest, if he'd just said he was unhappy. But then I remember he did choose. He chose betrayal. He chose secrecy. He chose himself. And that choice freed me. Because for the first time in decades, I'm not living under someone else's shadow. I'm not the wife behind the name. I am the name. Evelyn Sharp, businesswoman, survivor, teacher, builder. One of the women in my financial group said it best after her own difficult split. He didn't break me. He just broke the version of me that was willing to accept less. Exactly. I walk these garden paths now, and I don't hear his voice. I hear mine. I hear the quiet that follows after you've spoken your truth. I hear the breeze rustling leaves, not whispers of scandal. People still ask from time to time how I stayed so calm, how I didn't confront him at the wedding, how I didn't tear everything down in rage. But I wasn't interested in chaos. I was interested in consequences. I didn't want revenge that looked dramatic. I wanted resolution that lasted. Douglas lost everything, not because I destroyed him, but because I stopped holding him up. I removed the scaffolding. The quiet, unseen support that made everything look effortless. And once that disappeared, so did the illusion. I no longer wear a mask. I no longer need to smile when I'm dying inside. I no longer pretend I'm fine for the sake of appearances. Now, when I smile, it's real. It's not because someone told me to. It's because I earned it. This garden, this home, this life I've reclaimed, it isn't haunted anymore. It's sacred. It's mine. So to anyone watching this who's been betrayed, discarded, or told they're just the background in someone else's story, hear me clearly. You are not the background. You are the story. You are the voice they didn't hear coming, the hand they didn't know was steering the ship. And when they whisper their goodbye like they're already gone, just smile. Let them go. Then build something so strong behind their back they'll spend the rest of their life wondering how they ever thought they could live without you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who claimed to love you? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. And if Evelyn's story moved, you hit that like button and subscribe, because some betrayals break us, but others, they reveal the power we never knew we had. What would you do if the person who raised you stole your future with a smile? You didn't need it anyway. My father said his voice casual through my phone speaker, like he hadn't just admitted to stealing my entire college fund. I stood frozen in the middle of my tiny London apartment, the early morning light casting long shadows across the floor. I was 25 one semester away from earning my degree, and my father had just drained the $42,000 I'd worked years to save. 4 years of scholarships, part-time jobs, budgeting, every coffee and cab ride. Gone. And he sounded like he was commenting on the weather. How much is left, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hands were trembling. Left none of it, honey. I had some debts to clear up. His tone didn't waver. But don't worry, you're smart. You'll figure something out. Figure something out. As if I hadn't already done that for years. As if being responsible was a flaw he could exploit. I see, I said quietly. That's my girl. He chuckled, mistaking my silence for acceptance. Always practical. Listen, I gotta run meeting some friends for drinks. Drinks. With my future. I sat down at my desk, the one facing a cobbled street I'd fallen in love with during study abroad. The city that had once felt like a dream now felt like a trap. I had 3 months left in the UK, 3 months to find a way to pay for my last year or go home empty-handed, with nothing but a mountain of student debt and a broken promise. My phone buzzed again, a text from him, "Don't mention this to your mom or grandma. No need to worry them." Of course he didn't want them to know, just like he didn't want them to know about his gambling debts, or the borrowed money from my childhood birthdays that never returned, or the failed business ventures that had left us bouncing between homes. He always kept his image intact while burying his mistakes under other people's trust. But this time, he'd gone too far. I opened my laptop, first documentation, bank statements, account history, every dollar I'd deposited since high school, every scholarship award, every withdrawal he'd made, then research, legal resources, financial aid, emergency funding, remote jobs, anything that could help me salvage the future he'd tried to erase. My father always thought I was soft because I didn't yell. He thought I was easy to manipulate because I didn't fight back, not out loud. But what he never realized was that my calm wasn't surrender. It was strategy. He thought he'd buried me. He had no idea I was about to grow roots, but I had no idea how deep his betrayal truly went. Legally, he had every right to access the account I told Emma, my roommate, as she stared at the bank statements scattered across our kitchen table. He was a co-signer. I never thought he'd actually use that against me. Emma looked at me like I'd told her I'd been mugged in broad daylight by my own family. "Your father stole $42,000, Vanessa," she said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "He didn't access anything he robbed you. She wasn't wrong. But the law didn't care about ethics when it came to shared accounts. I'd opened it at 17 with my father's name attached so I could get started on building credit. Back then, he'd promised, 'It's just paperwork, sweetheart. I won't touch a dime.' I believed him. Of course I did. I was 17 and naive and still believed in fathers. Now all I had left was screenshots and shattered illusions. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I found out. Not even when I realized I might not graduate. But that night, after Emma went to bed, I sat on the bathroom floor with the lights off and my laptop on my knees. I listened to the quiet hum of the city outside as I scrolled through financial aid forms, part-time job listings, and legal forums full of stories like mine. Girls who trusted the wrong parent, girls who got used, girls who had to start over. The silence felt suffocating, and just when I thought I could breathe again, my phone buzzed. Another message from him. "Don't stress so much. Maybe this is a sign you should take a break from school. I know some guys who could get you a modeling gig. Better money than that degree." That broke me. Not because of what he said, but because he believed it. Because after all these years, after every GPA I maintained every hour I'd worked, every night I'd studied until my eyes ached, he still thought my value was in my looks, not my mind, not my drive, not my future. He never saw me. To him, I was just a tool, a backup plan, a pretty daughter he could cash out when times got tight. I slammed my laptop shut and curled up on the cold tile floor. For the first time in years, I felt like I was 13 again when he used to borrow my savings and say, "You won't miss it. You don't even need that doll, right?" Except now, the doll was my education. He hadn't just taken my money, he'd taken my power. And I didn't know how to get it back. Until one person, one message changed everything. "Called your father today," the email from my grandmother read. "He seemed nervous when I asked about your college fund. Is everything okay?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding. He was nervous. That meant he knew he was caught or about to be. I hadn't planned to tell her yet, but suddenly I couldn't stop myself. My fingers flew across the keys. "Can we talk? There's something you should know." That conversation cracked everything open. My grandmother, the one who'd taught me to write thank you notes, who used to slip extra money into my coat pockets during holidays, who'd always asked about my classes first. Not my love life, was furious. "That man has gone too far," she said, fire in her voice, stealing from his own daughter. This ends now. We scheduled a video call the next evening. She brought in my mom and my Aunt Sarah, the only lawyer in the family. I watched their faces go from confusion to horror, to rage. My mom's hand shook as she read the text messages I'd forwarded. I had no idea, she whispered. He told me you'd taken a break from school, that you were tired, that you wanted to come home. Of course he had. He always had a version of the truth that made him the good guy, but now the truth had witnesses. I've been documenting everything I told them, every withdrawal, every message, every call. My Aunt Sarah leaned forward. He was a co-signer, yes, but we might have a case, especially if he acknowledged the money was meant for school. I pulled up emails and texts. He had, so many times. Casual little phrases like, "Don't worry, I'll put it back soon," or "You know it's for your future." Perfect. Sarah said, eyes narrowing like a litigator in court. Not legally binding, but excellent leverage. That night, a plan began to form. My grandmother would call him, let him know we knew. Sarah would draft a formal demand letter, and my mom, after years of hesitation, would finally file for divorce. "He's always underestimated you," Grandma said. "Time to show him who he really raised." The shift was subtle but seismic. For the first time in weeks, I felt my spine straighten. My breath deepened. I wasn't alone. I had a team. I had evidence. I had fire. When my father called again, his tone was careful. "Your grandmother seemed upset. You didn't tell her anything, did you?" I kept my voice even. "About what, Dad, the college fund you stole? Or how little you think of my future?" Silence. Then now. "Princess, let's not be dramatic. Don't call me Princess. Don't call me at all. From now on, everything goes through Aunt Sarah. Sarah." "Why would she be?" "She's a lawyer, and you're about to need one." He thought I was bluffing. He had no idea the avalanche that was coming. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he texted. "It was just money. Family's more important than money." I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Aunt Sarah. Let him keep digging. That week, the demand letter went out certified signature required. It listed every withdrawal, every message admitting guilt, every false promise. It gave him a deadline and consequences. He called the moment he received it. "You can't sue your own father." "Watch me," I said, then hung up. That was the last time I answered one of his calls. What came next was a slow unraveling. His carefully crafted image of the fun, generous dad began to peel away. Family members started calling ones I hadn't spoken to in years. "I can't believe he did this to you," one said. "He borrowed from my daughter's birthday fund, too," said another. My cousin Jake messaged, "Remember when he said our college money was safe with him? Guess we know what that meant." Turns out I wasn't the first. I was just the first to push back. Grandma banned him from her house. Mom filed for divorce on grounds of financial infidelity, among other things. And Sarah went to war. She discovered he'd purchased a brand new car 2 months earlier, posted vacation photos from Aruba, maintained a country club membership, still paying monthly dues. "He's not broke," she said, flipping through statements. "He's just a liar, and he's about to be held accountable." We filed a motion to freeze assets tied to my college fund withdrawals. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Meanwhile, I transferred every cent I had left to a new bank, changed passwords, closed every joint account. My name and his would never share another document again. Through my university's emergency financial aid office, I explained my situation, leaving out no detail. The woman on the other end of the call paused before saying, "We've heard stories like yours, but rarely this bad." They offered me temporary relief and helped set up a deferred tuition plan. And then quietly, without making it about pride or payback, my grandmother stepped in. "Unlike your father," she said, sliding a check across our video call screen, "I understand the value of education and promises. I didn't want to take it, but I needed to, and she wanted me to succeed." In the following weeks, Gregory's texts went from arrogant to desperate. "You're ruining my life. This is destroying the family. I raised you better than this." Each one forwarded, documented, filed. When he tried to turn the younger cousins against me, telling them I was trying to bankrupt him out of spite, they forwarded those messages too. My file grew thicker. My resolve stronger. Every move I made was legal, strategic, calculated. He'd taught me to survive chaos. Now I was turning that survival into control, but the real reckoning hadn't even begun. You emptied your daughter's college fund to pay off gambling debts, the judge asked, barely able to contain her disbelief. The courtroom was silent except for the ticking of the overhead clock. Gregory stood there wringing his hands like a child caught stealing cookies, his usual smirk nowhere in sight. I was going to pay it back, he stammered. Eventually. She's my daughter. We have an understanding. Do you? The judge replied, flipping through our submitted documents. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've spent 3 years avoiding work, defrauding relatives, and maintaining a luxury lifestyle off other people's money. That hearing was only for the divorce, but it was the first public shattering of the image he'd built for decades. Gregory the fun-loving, misunderstood dad. Gregory the charming risk-taker. Now Gregory the thief. That same week, Aunt Sarah dropped the next bombshell. We found the offshore account, she said, tossing a stack of printed statements on the table. He's been funneling money for years under shell companies using fake consulting fees. So much for being broke. We sent the documents to every party involved as creditors, the university, even the court, handling Mom's divorce. Suddenly, the tone of every conversation changed. He wasn't just a manipulative father. He was a serial abuser of financial trust. Even his friends, those who had once defended him, backed away. A few called to apologize. One confessed Gregory had borrowed $15,000 from him for a real estate flip that never existed. Meanwhile, my life was rebuilding itself quietly and steadily. I'd landed a part-time job through a contact my grandmother arranged, an alumna of my university, who had once faced similar betrayal. She became a mentor of sorts. She said, "What your father did was wrong, but what you're doing now, that's power. You're not surviving, you're redirecting the damage." That stuck with me. Back home, the family was unraveling, but realigning too. We started having dinners without him. My cousins, once afraid to speak, began sharing their own stories of lies and manipulation. Even his sister, my Aunt Patricia, said he's been doing this for years. He used guilt like currency, but no more. By now, the demand letter had matured into a binding repayment agreement with interest. Court-backed, no wiggle room, monthly deductions from his paycheck. And because his schemes had dried up, Gregory had to get a real job, one he couldn't lie his way into or out of. The final reveal came from a social media post, one he didn't know I could see. He'd created a burner account under a fake name posting in a private group for entrepreneurs wronged by family. In the post, he painted himself as a victim of a daughter who turned cold and tried to ruin his life over a misunderstanding. The comments tore him apart. "You stole from her," someone replied. "That's not a misunderstanding, that's abuse." That thread was sent to our entire extended family. Silence followed, then support. He'd lost his last refuge, but I still had one final step before I could let go. The last payment hit my account on a Tuesday. $42,000 paid back to the cent, with interest. Attached to the transaction was a note, "Now can we be family again?" I didn't respond. I printed it, filed it with everything else, screenshots, bank records, texts, emails, all the fake apologies and twisted guilt trips. Not because I needed proof anymore, but because I never wanted to forget how far I'd come. I was no longer the daughter he could manipulate. I was the woman he underestimated and lost. That spring, I stood on the stage at my graduation in London in a navy suit and heels I'd bought myself. My grandmother sat in the front row, tears in her eyes, beaming. My mother held her hand free for the first time in decades. My Aunt Sarah gave me a proud nod from her seat beside them. He wasn't there. He tried to be sent messages begging for an invitation, calling my success our victory. I didn't even flinch when I read them, because my success was mine, built from the rubble of his betrayal. He tried to take everything from me, my future, my independence, my worth, and in doing so, he handed me the one thing he never meant to clarity. At my firm's annual charity gala, they asked me to speak about resilience. I didn't mention his name. I didn't have to. I spoke about what happens when trust is broken, about how sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones holding the knife, and how survival isn't enough, you have to rise. The crowd stood when I finished. Weeks later, he sent a birthday card. Inside, he'd written, "Still paying for one mistake. When will you let it go?" I pinned it to my bulletin board right next to my framed diploma and my promotion letter. Love isn't unconditional when trust is shattered, and forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned. Now my life is mine. My small flat in London furnished with my taste, funded by my work. My career built from late nights and unshakable grit. My name no longer tethered to his. He calls sometimes. I don't answer. He tags me in old family photos. I untag. He tells others we're on good terms. They know better. I've learned that healing doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with silence, sometimes with space, and sometimes with fireproof boundaries. So here I am, whole, steady, free. And I have to ask you this. Have you ever had to protect your peace from someone who was supposed to protect you? Tell me your story below and don't forget to like and subscribe.